Serious, when was the first time you had experienced racism? Was 8. Was playing on some monkey bars in a neighbor's backyard with their daughter. I'm Asian, she's white. My twin sister was also with us. We were having the time of our lives. My sis and I had been coming over 4 weeks after school. No permission needed. Her mom came home early. She came to the backyard and started yelling. Grabbed her crying daughter, yelling she can't play with us anymore because she's already got so many nice white friends. She brought her daughter inside and came out again to yell at us to go home, that she never wants to see us on her property anymore and her daughter can't be friends with us, ever. So we left, crying all the way home. Our mom was there and she asked what's wrong. Did we fall off the monkey bars? We said no. Told her the story. She hugged us and told us what racism is. I'll never forget. Jesus Christ, what the frick is wrong with people? 5-6 years old, some guy in the furniture store parking lot was yelling at my dad to go back where you came from. We had moved west from NY, and I only recently learned about the concept of foreign refugees, schoolmates from Cambodia, etc. So it took me a minute to realize what he meant. When I was a little kid, my mum was accused of stealing me. I'm Asian and she's white. I'm adopted. My dad, also white, feels uncomfortable in public with me because people think I'm a mail order bride. I've experienced racism even amongst my own race. I'm a darker skinned Malay. Lighter skinned Malays are always acting all superior and crap because of it. Sheesh. Apparently this is common in some African countries. 2. Darker skinned Africans are treated worse than lighter skinned ones, and if you go to an average African import store in the USA, there is always a shelf of skin bleaching cream. At my grandmother's house in the 1960s, I was old enough to understand some of the nuances of speech. My mother and grandmother were discussing my black, curly hair, and in a sarcastic manner, my grandmother said, "Perhaps he's got a touch of the tar brush." It was part of an ongoing love-hate relationship between my mother and grandmother, and although I knew the comment to be meant as an insult, it was a while before I knew my grandmother meant father unknown, and likely to be a black man. This tarbrush term was still common parlance in that part of the world when I left the area in the 1980s. Thank you for the interesting question. I don't understand this tarbrush term. In high school, one of my friends said to me, "You know, if you were a little bit fairer you'd have a chance with her." I still am not comfortable with my skin color. You know what negging is? It's an underhanded insult designed to undermine someone's self-esteem so they are more easily manipulated. Often used to make girls doubt themselves so they think they can't do better. Negging can also be deployed against guys under the guise of advice or friendly banter. The first I can remember was about age 5-6. We spent more time at that age with family and close friends, so I first learned I was an outsider by other Asians. They spoke the language. I didn't, and my mom was white, so the other kids' cousins made sure to distinguish I wasn't really one of them. Around the same age I learned at school that I'd be the token Asian friend. The most common phrase kids and now adult professionals use is, "What are you? Well, I'm some kind of Asian halfsy who looks Hispanic. People suck." I'm a white-black mix, but my skin is pretty fair, so I don't experience much of the racism against black people. When I was in 7th grade though, I went to a mostly white school, and I was the only kid of color in my math class, and the only mixed kid in my grade, I think. I was decent at math before I had this teacher, but I started doing horribly in her class as she would take off crazy amounts of points for little mistakes. I had to start going a mathematics learning center just to keep from failing the class. At first I just thought she didn't like me as a person until I moved on to 8th grade. I knew 2 sisters who were also mixed in the grade below who were now in her math class, and they experienced the same problems with her. We found out that no one else had a problem with this teacher being crazy harsh, only us mixed kids. It was pretty indirect, but it raised some flags. I was 8 years old. I was at school in London and some of the cool kids came up to me and started saying that I was a terrorist. I didn't know what that meant and I doubt they did either. I still remember the look on my mum's face when I went home and asked her. She just looked so sad. Once she'd explained to me what terrorism was and why the kids were saying it, I started noticing it everywhere. Ignorance is bliss. I was walking and holding hands with a girl after a date. She was colored, which is a different thing than black in South Africa. Near the train station in Cape Town, a large group of black men objected threateningly to my stupidity and thinking that just because Mandela got selected I get to walk around holding hands with a colored girl. Things moved towards violence, and another group of men, colored men, arrived and stepped in on that point, taking my side, I think, just to motivate conflict with the other group. My date and I just ran. Biracial person here, white and black. I got followed in a store when I was a teenager. I had been called a list of racial slurs before then, but being followed stands out the most. I mean, elementary school, other kids making fun of my middle name which is Chinese, or doing that thing where they pull their eyes to be narrower and then speaking in broken English. IDK, kids are dumb. Where does it go from cultural insensitivity to racism? Not a clue, but did it make me feel like an outsider? Yup. You're supposed to pull your eyes wider and walk around saying I'm Billy. I suck at math and eat burgers till I have diabetes in an American voice. My family and I lived in Saudi Arabia for 16 years. When I was 4, a bunch of Arab women pulled me and my sisters, she was 7 at that time, hair and laughed about it. Being an innocent preschooler at that time, I was physically hurt but didn't understand why they did that to me and my sister. My mom just told us they fancied our hair, so I just hid up a little from the pain and moved on. Fast forward to when I was around 9-10 years old, the same crap happened to me while I was shopping for school supplies at a store near my school. That time, I was pretty sure it wasn't because they liked my curly hair. BC I saw a condescending smirk as I looked at the grown-ass woman who pulled my hair. We barely go back home, so I've always thought that KSA was my home. I realized that it really wasn't and will never be completely accepted the way Asians are in other parts of the world. When my mother ripped my hand out of the hand of the black boy I was playing with after school. You were the best at pretending to be Sonic, Thomas. Growing up, my parents were civil rights testers, people hired volunteer to investigate specific claims of racial discrimination in businesses. I remember being with my mom at a restaurant and being made to wait for a table, or being denied service, while my dad, the white man for the test, would be seated immediately. Some butthole store owner from Hong Kong told us to leave saying no Filipino, no Filipino, no money. When I was around 4, I was watching Sesame Street. There was a black man on the screen, and I tried to ask why do some people have different skin colors, but since I wasn't good at expressing my thoughts, I said why does there have to be black people? I didn't understand why my mom was so angry, but that's when I was taught that racism is a thing, and it's bad. I mean, your intentions were pure, so I'm cracking up at this story. Glad you were able to be taught about it in a benign way. Well, I've experienced instances of subtle racism before, but I would say that I experienced outright racism only really when I moved. When I got my first job here, customer service, some typical old man, probably from the colonial era, refused my service and loudly talked to my co-worker about certain nationalities and their thieving nature. Then at my second job in a nightclub, which I still work at actually, I get occasional comments like my skin being the color of crap from drunk, aggressive people. I hate it so much. I go through more subtle types of racism too, mostly in which people assume negative things about me based on my nationality, and I would say it bothers me more than the above. I come from a country which isn't really well liked and kind of misrepresented on Reddit and by Western countries in general. It's given me a bit of a complex where I'm conscious to shed the stereotypes people tend to assume about me. I can't really explain it better than that. My mom still talks about this one. It was when I was 4, my little brother was 2, my older brother was 5, 1/2, and my sister was 7. My mom would walk us to a church program when we were young. We weren't Christian, we are Muslim, and on our way there some men in a truck yelled at my mom saying, "Go back to your country, you dirty immigrant." Apparently I yelled back, "Hey, that's not very nice. Have a good day, mister." Because my mom always taught us to be kind even if someone is mean. My mom still brings it up asking me why I'm not that nice anymore. Now I just gotta say, Mom, I'm not as optimistic as I used to be. Hey, that's not very nice. Have a good day, mister. Love it. In Japan, an old man asked me in English if I wanted to marry a Japanese. I said I wasn't sure and he said, "That's good. You never see the bear with the pig, and you never see the dog with the fish, and listed a bunch of animals. I was more impressed by his vocabulary of animals though. Bonus. I'm getting married to a Japanese next month and he is absolutely invited to the wedding, provided he can name 50 animals in English and apologize for being so rude. I am white British, but I was with my black Portuguese friends in a pub bathroom. I was having a wee and they were by the sinks talking in their language. Another white British woman came out of a cubicle and started to tell them to speak English and frick off back to their own country. When I came out of my cubicle, she rounded on me and told me to frick off to my own country too. As soon as I spoke in my very obvious British accent and informed her I was already in my own county, she apologized and said her beef was with the black girls, not me. I told her I didn't give a frick. I now have a problem with her. Called her a racist and said she was an embarrassment to white people and made her apologize to my friends or I'll get her kicked out. One of my friends was crying in the toilet by this point and the other told me once the white lady left that this happened all the time. Why people feel the need to bully based on skin or language is beyond me. Yeah, our country has quite a lot of those people. Sometimes it seems like racism is always going to be around, especially with some of the small villages like where I'm from. We have one black family and you should see the way some people look at them. You'd think it was the 1800s or something. When I was about 4, I was flying from Maine to Arizona. Our flight had a layover in Boston, and as we were changing gates, I met a black person for the first time. Maine is whiter than Friends. He was selling watches at a kiosk, and when I stopped to look at him he broke into a smile and gave one to me. It was a brilliant, easy, and authentic smile. I didn't know it at the time, but it would become one of my earliest memories. It was that indelible. As we were leaving I told my mother that I liked the man, and she said I couldn't trust people like him. I never for a second believed her, and I'm glad we don't talk these days. I was called the N-word in the 3rd grade. When I was in a small store, a black woman was ignored. She didn't speak the language of the country I was in, but all she wanted to buy was a single Coca-Cola. There was no line at the shop, but the woman was in the center. The woman behind the counter was an old white female, and absolutely ignored her. 2 or 3 people bought stuff. The black woman left shortly after. Me and a friend, both little brown boys at the time, grew up in a small city in the north of England. We used to pride ourselves on being one of the few minorities in our school as well as out of the school. The fact we were friends on top of this was extra sweet. Obviously though, this was a honeypot for racism when we used to hang out. One of the biggest first big incidents was when we hung out near the riverside, minding our own business, before we started getting harassed by a group of much older kids, young adults. We were 13 at the time. They looked around 20 or so. We were separated by a fence and some shrubbery, but nothing too hard to get over. My friend was a big stickler for not taking crap, whereas I was happy ignoring them and walking away. He said something back, and things escalated quickly. They were waiting for a fight argument, and started pelting rocks at us. We both ran away with a group of them throwing rocks and shouting racial abuse at us until we reached safety. For a year after that, when we used to hang out, we used to walk separately to avoid any assumptions and make it harder for something similar to happen again.